The seventh of 12 types of riches, as defined by Napoleon Hill, is the willingness to share one's blessings. Now, today we're going to be examining this type of wealth through the lens of the biblical text. From the days of Moses, when a covenant with Israel was made between God and that nation, there's been an ultimate vision of a people that would thrive to such a degree that all men and women, great or small, rich or poor, old or young, would always have enough. We see evidence of this immediately through the book of Leviticus, where it states, "When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner." That is, according to the law, the Torah, no one was to go hungry. The poor, regardless of the situation as to why they were poor, had some place to go. And in fact, in an agricultural world, that meant there was more than enough for everyone, so long as that law was observed. As part of their national constitution, which was the law, 11 tribes agreed to fully support the tribe of Levites, which dedicated their full attention, time, and energy to the ministry of the tabernacle and eventually the permanent temple. That's where the idea of the tithe comes from. So think about that. There were 12 tribes. One of the tribes was dedicated fully to the ministry, so they couldn't provide for themselves. The 1/10 from the 11 other tribes was given to the Levites, so that they had essentially 110% of what any other tribe had, and thus everyone benefited. The nation had ministers of their central temple to minister to God and to the people, and the priesthood had just as much abundance as everyone else. No one was left out, not the poor, not the foreigner, not those dedicated to charity and ministry. And so, from the beginning of Israel's constitution, there was an intentional focus on enough for all. But here's a very important distinction. Napoleon Hill doesn't say that the seventh type of riches is sharing one's blessings. He distinctly says it's the willingness to share one's blessings. That is, it has to be done of one's own free will in order to be considered a true value to the individual. So this is not the same as a forced redistribution of wealth. The value to the individual, to rank it among the 12 types of riches, means that an individual shares his or her blessings of their own free will. And we see this theme continued into Jesus' day, as Jesus is quoted as having said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." Well, that's an interesting thought, because everyone enjoys receiving something, whether it's something we need or something we just want, or even something that we didn't know we wanted. So think about this equation. If we make receiving equal to 1 and giving equal to 2, then that means that we can immediately add value to someone's life by giving to them, but simultaneously, our own lives are also improved simply from the knowledge of having blessed someone. So this is not a zero-sum game. From this higher perspective, we immediately create more value when we choose to give to another, more value than ever would have existed if the gift had remained ungiven. And while it's valuable to receive, it's even more valuable to give. And that creates a world where plenty and abundance are the norm. The prophet Zechariah, who lived half a century before Christ, saw a vision in which an angel said, "Behold, I will bring my servant the branch. I will remove the iniquity of this land in a single day. In that day, declares the Lord of hosts, every one of you will invite his neighbor to come under his vine and under his fig tree." Now, this imagery was common among the prophets, actually. The idea that a tree was a shelter for all sorts of animals. Nations were often spoken of as being represented by trees, and they would either be cut down or they would grow and overshadow all the other forest plants, wherein all the birds and the beasts would find their shelter in or under its branches. So here Zechariah is turning this imagery into an individual one. In the day when the iniquity of Israel would be taken away in a single day, that would herald a new era in which abundance would be so great that everyone would share their blessings with one another. There would be more than enough to go around, and each individual would willingly invite their neighbors to share in that abundance. Well before Zechariah's day, King Solomon himself had observed a powerful truth. He wrote, "One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give, and only suffers want. Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered. Now, this truth is twofold. First, there's the very natural reality that a generous person is going to make many friends and is going to gain significant trust in his or her community, so that everything a generous person attempts within their social circles is immediately going to be met with less resistance than someone who's ungenerous or uninvolved or unknown. In fact, many times, their idea or their goal will be met with proactive willingness from the community to make their intentions happen because their community remembers what this person did for them in the past. They know his or her reputation and they trust them. So this is a very natural result of a charitable constitution. And then there's also the supernatural element, which is clearly outlined by the Psalms, by Solomon, and by the prophets like Malachi before Christ, as well as Christ himself when he says, "Give and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you." Now, one last thing I want to mention about the willingness to share one's blessings. Why it not only improves the world at large, but it also improves the giver's life specifically. Jesus made a rather difficult statement from his Sermon on the Mount. He said, "If anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you." Now, this is a difficult statement precisely because the end result of such a habit is that people who know this tendency about you will absolutely take advantage of it. If someone is an open hand all the time, then sooner or later he will have nothing left. Half the world will be takers from the half of the world that are givers, and resources will flow into the least worthy and most corrupt places. The good will give to both the good and to the evil. So what do we do about that? A rather mysterious sage named Agur, who lived sometime around 1000 BC, spoke a proverb which goes like this: "The leech has 2 daughters, give and give." And that is exactly what an unlimited yes culture would empower. Leeches who only ask for more and more. And he continues, "Under 3 things the earth trembles. Under 4, it cannot bear up. A slave when he becomes king, and a fool when he is filled with food. An unloved woman when she gets a husband," or you could turn that around and say an unloved man when he gets a wife, and a maidservant when she displaces her mistress. What is the point of this saying? It's illustrating people who get something that they weren't ready for and they didn't earn. A slave may think he would make a great king, but he has no idea what goes into being a king. He's never been a king. Naturally, he's subject to all the same temptations and weaknesses as the man who sits on the throne. He just doesn't know it because he hasn't sat there before. A fool who's been given all the things he never could earn for himself will never be able to stand on his own 2 feet, and he'll grow even more toxic and become a leech all his life, as Agur says. An unloved man or woman, or rather one that's unlovable and contentious, will only make the world worse off for getting married because they will drag down and entrap their husband or wife, their spouse, and rob them of their individuality and freedom to follow after their own calling. Napoleon Hill, who defined these 12 riches we're discussing, also believed that who you marry was a key ingredient to the ultimate success of your life, because marriage is a 2-way street, and one individual who is not ready for it can bring the other individual down with them. That's why the earth shakes under toxic bonds. And finally, when a maidservant displaces her mistress, this is similar to a servant becoming king. When the one under authority suddenly gains authority, or the one without money suddenly comes into a lot of money, not through the proper channels, but by some serendipitous happenstance, by some stroke of good fortune. And now authority has been granted to someone who is neither prepared for it nor deserving of it. They don't have the character yet built to deal with it. And that's why it's so important, I believe, to be discerning in the knowledge of what it means to be willing to share one's blessings. We have to know how to balance the difference between empowering a person, which is among the greatest gifts we can give, and enabling a person to persist down a wrong path. So let me point out an instance with the apostles Peter and John when they did exactly this. Now, Peter and John were going up to the temple at the hour of prayer, the 9th hour, and a man, lame from birth, was being carried, whom they laid daily at the gate of the temple that is called the Beautiful Gate, to ask alms, basically to ask money, of those entering the temple. Seeing Peter and John about to go into the temple, he asked to receive alms. And Peter directed his gaze at him, as did John, and said, "Look at us." And he fixed his attention on them, expecting to receive something from them. But Peter said, "I have no silver and gold, but what I do have, I give to you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk." And he took him by the right hand and raised him up. And immediately his feet and ankles were made strong, and leaping up, he stood and began to walk and entered the temple with them, walking and leaping and praising God. Here we see Peter and John not give the man what he asked for. He asked for alms. He asked for money. They didn't give him money. They said they didn't have any with them. But what they gave him was empowering, not enabling. Rather, they decided to give him the use of his legs back. And you can imagine that he was far more grateful for that miracle than he would have been with a handful of coins that he got every day. They empowered. They didn't enable persisting bad habits, or in his case, a persisting handicap. They healed. They empowered. When Jesus set people free, he often did so with the warning to change their previous way of living, or they would fall back into the pit which he just raised them out of. And the fall might be worse than before. He empowered. He gave people a new chance at life, a new chance to make better decisions, a new chance at an abundant life. But he didn't enable persisting bad habits in a way which others could take advantage of. And so we see a world in which not the coercion, but the willingness to share one's blessings is a world in which everyone has enough. And this seventh type of wealth enriches every giver and every receiver. This follows after the capacity for faith, because I believe there is a connection between being able to be willing to let something go with full faith that you will suffer no lack on account of giving it away. It's a spiritual principle that takes faith to believe. Giving is perhaps the ultimate type of faith, letting go of something without the knowledge of whether it will ever be repaid, without the expectation of it being repaid, but knowing that it is more blessed to give than to receive. And it comes precisely before the eighth type of riches, which is a labor of love, and that takes the emotion out of it. Loving what you do and the people you do it for is an important part of wealth, but whether you feel love as an emotion or not, the willingness to serve your fellow human beings and care for them and share your blessings with them comes first. The action of love comes first. The feeling of love or passion, of compassion, may come before or after, but the feeling is not required for the act to occur, for the willingness to occur. In a world that follows after the example of Jesus, of Peter, of John, and of the biblical authors who speak on this topic, we create momentum in the direction of Zechariah's prophetic vision, in which every one of you will invite his neighbor to come under his vine and under his fig tree. And as Christ said of the kingdom of heaven, the whole world will come to be nourished in the life of its branches. He said, the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is larger than all the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. Jesus was that small seed from Nazareth, buried in the ground, and who sprung up like a new tree, a new spiritual nation modeled after the faith of Abraham, and filling the earth little by little until abundant life encompasses the whole world. And that vision is advanced when each of us makes that small but powerful decision to be willing to share our blessings with one another in whatever ways that are uniquely ours to give.